The image of the woman clothed with the sun is pretty otherworldly, and it's made even more so by the fact that she's facing a mythical dragon. And that otherworldliness is important because this is an image of what we can become in our spiritual lives, and part of the point of spiritual living is to aspire to something otherworldly, something that is different from what we experience in our ordinary everyday lives. And because it's so obviously not something that could happen in this natural reality, the Lord is more obviously sort of tapping us on the shoulder and asking us to look deeper at the symbolism for how this might apply to us in our lives. Now, what you're going to find is, as we talk about this, pretty much everything that I'm going to be saying is really aspirational. It's going to be the kind of thing where you say, well, someday, maybe I will be like that. Not, I got this. And that's part of the point. Because the Lord is calling us to something bigger than where we are right now, something more beautiful, something harder to imagine. However far we are in our journey, there's always that sort of otherworldly next step that's more than we can really imagine being reality in our lives. And the call is to believe in that promise enough to walk the path. And it's not easy. Next week we're going to be talking about the dragon, the major opposition to that dream. And then we'll be talking about how we fight it to make it a reality in our lives. At the end of the service, we'll have a chance to take Holy Supper, which is the most powerful ritual in our church. And it's a place where you can dream about making changes in your lives that are not reality at the moment. And sometimes we focus on the very concrete, help me not lose my temper with my kids. Help me avoid being critical in a way that I have been. But I think this talk and this image of the woman clothed with the sun is an invitation to dream a little bit bigger, to stretch ourselves to become something more than we ordinarily think of, and to ask the Lord to bring that bigger dream into reality, because the requests you make of the Lord are the help that you get. So if you make a bigger ask, you're more likely to get bigger help. At the camping weekend last weekend, I was talking about what would it be like to go all in for the Lord. I'm going to be expanding on some of those ideas today. So we're going to look at the following things. We're going to look at the woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet and what that means. We're talking about the male child she was about to give birth to, the labor and pain that she went through, and then being in the wilderness for 1,260 days. So, woman clothed with the sun. Now, first off, the way that we often talk about this in the new church is at sort of a big institutional level, the establishment of the new church, and a picture of a way of being that contrasted to the traditional way that it had been done. We'll be touching on that a bit the next couple of weeks, but today I'm really going to be focusing on that woman, that church that can exist in you and me in our individual lives. So this woman is us. This is the part of us that is trying to develop a spiritual way of living, that is trying to stretch ourselves to something bigger and better. And this woman is clothed with the sun, or more literally, cast about or surrounded by the sun. Just thinking in terms of everyday life, I want you to think about a couple that is newly in love. We talk about how radiant they are, because their love just shines out of them as they move into exploring the new wonder of that possibility that's before them. Can you imagine being that way in all aspects of your life, where you're just radiating the kind of joy and wonder and presence of something miraculous in all the interactions that you have? Because that's why we're here. We are here to learn to love with our whole being. Not just do our duty, obey the rules, though that's perfectly good to do. We're here to react to everyone that we see with a desire to serve. We're here to look for the good in them. We're here to seek their long-term benefit rather than their present pleasure. But it's even more than that, because we're told that the woman clothed with the sun stands for not just loving our neighbor, but loving the Lord. And therefore, or from this, loving the neighbor. It's hard to love the Lord, isn't it? It's hard to picture loving the Lord. Easy to picture loving the neighbor. Now, the Lord gives us some really clear teaching. He says, if you love me, keep my commandments. So that's a really simple thing to do. We know the rules. Okay, the 10 Commandments are rules of loving the Lord and loving the neighbor. The golden rule is all the teachings about, caring for other people and discerning charity and new church teaching. Those are all rules for loving other people. But I think it's even a little bit more than that. Because we spend our lives dealing with the people around us, and the reality is that some of them bug us. And I think most of us have the sort of mental picture of, well, I can love you up to this point. But if you cross that line, the gloves are off. Okay? Then you're on your own. Our love has limits, but we know that the Lord's love doesn't have limits. So on the canoe trip, I was saying, well, what if you were in each situation saying, well, what would the Lord want me to do? When we do that, it tends to right away clarify our thinking. And what it does is it has this balance of love, which we know the Lord has, but also infinite wisdom. The Lord is not just a pushover. We also know that side. There's this balance that takes place almost without thinking about it. Let me give you an example. On my run on Thursday, I spent far too much time thinking about what I should say to someone who was rude on the trail. And I came up with a beautiful, foul, vicious comeback. And I was just reveling in, too late to say it, this comeback, which was very alluring. Because, see, that person had gotten past that line in my head. The gloves were off. But then I actually, on that run, said, would the Lord want me to say this? And it was just, no, of course not. Would the Lord want me to even think this? No. And then I had to face the fact that I'd moved from love to justice and from justice to revenge and had to let go of that. And that was all useful work to do. But what it required is saying, what would the Lord do? What would the Lord want? That pushes through all of the layers and gets us down to, right, I'm going to do that. How do I do it? Not should I do it, but I'm going to, how do I do it? That's what love for the Lord brings to our lives, as we get to work on the practicalities and not worry about the if. And we can all think of people, if we give it some thought, who have been those beacons of love in our lives. There's a shining quality to people who just look at you and see you That's what the Lord wants us to aspire to. This woman also had the moon under her feet. And that moon is a symbol of the part of us that just wants to obey the rules. Don't ask me to understand it. I just want to know what the preacher man says, and I'll go and do it. And there's a lot of virtue in that, right? But here's the thing. The teaching that's explaining this says when we just obey the rules as rules, what we find is that falsities creep in because we don't really understand the rules. So I'll ask you a question I've asked before. How many of you hated math in school? Okay? How many of you had the experience of plugging in the formula that you learned in class and it didn't work and you had no idea how to fix it? Makes you just want to run screaming, right? Because the rule was just a rule. It wasn't something that you could adapt to this other problem that was different from the one the teacher did up on. That's the challenge when we just obey the rules. Now, it'll work, but there's going to be more pain in our lives, and there's going to be less joy. So the Lord is inviting us to stretch ourselves, to be willing to engage and push ourselves more than we want to. Another example, people get married, and they know the rules are you treat other people nice, and they're going to treat you nice. It's a good rule. You can survive pretty much any relationship doing that. But there are a whole bunch of other things. How does this male, female, who's got what roles, how do our minds work? How do you deal with fair fighting? How do you deal with money? And there are all these curveballs that life throws at you, and if it's just the rules, you tend to trip. And you get to that beyond the line, the gloves are out, and life gets painful. So the woman was wrapped about with the sun, and that is the Lord's call to us to go all in on trying to live as an embodiment of love as much as we can, and that means asking Him and asking what He would do. And we all go all in on a very few things. And the thing about spiritual living is it's got spread. When you go all in on that, it influences every other thing you do. So be that beacon of radiating love that's about to give birth. That's our second thing. This male child. When you think of a baby, you think of something that's small and tender and vulnerable. So it might be surprising to learn that the symbolism of this baby is doctrine. Doctrine, something, abstract, cold, hard, things that theologians argue with each other about. And in keeping with the theme, we're told that this is doctrine coming from celestial love, or coming from love to the Lord. And what that means is an effort on our part to use all the truths we know as tools for loving other people, for authentically, truly caring for other people, for disciplining our minds so that we know how to help properly. So, example, someone says something crazy, just outright stupid in your light. What do? Doctrine by itself, rules say, that's really stupid. Even if you don't say it, you think it, right? What would doctrine from love do? Well, one of the things it might do is say, whoa, wait a minute, I didn't follow that. Can you explain? And dig a little bit deeper to try to find the kernel of truth that person is holding on to, even if you don't agree with all the applications, to seek the goodness that they're striving for and the good idea that you can agree with. that they were imperfectly expressing. Or pick something harder. A child or a friend is making very poor choices. Love alone says, hey, my child, right or wrong. Doctrine by itself is cold, hard, that is wrong, distancing, letting that person know it. But doctrine from love has that both and quality going. I believe what I believe, and that's important. And I love you. And I'm going to be present with my beliefs and acting from love. That's hard to do, isn't it? But that's doctrine from love. It's seeing the good in that person, not just the behavior that you don't agree with. Using everything that we know to try to be a tool for someone's long-term benefit. This woman cried out in labor and in pain to give birth. It'd be nice just to go out and spontaneously love other people. I know I'd like that. It's a little harder than that. It'd be nice to have all the tools to know how to love people. But doing that, figuring out how to do that stretches us. Just like giving birth. A woman has to stretch herself to be able to do that. And that's because our natural self, our sensory self, doesn't like thinking this way. It doesn't want to ask the thoughtful question when that person says something foolish. It doesn't want to do the hard work of showing up with integrity and love when someone that we care about is making choices that we don't agree with. That takes work. And it takes repeated work. It takes work that's longer than anybody wants to do, just like I think for most women giving birth, it's longer than anyone wants to do. But this is the work that changes us, because I'm willing to struggle for something. That labor to give birth is important. And I want you to notice something. Okay, that laboring is effort, right? I'm not going to be scrolling through my phone in the evening. I'm going to be thinking about how to deal with the situation. I'm going to be figuring out what I'm going to do the next time this shows up so that there's actually integrity built into my responses. But the thing I want you to notice is that the woman, love, labored and struggled to give birth not to love, but to doctrine. In our lives, we often feel annoyed with people. We don't want to do what we know we should. We know what we need to do, and we fall flat. We get up, we try again. We fall flat, we get up, we try again. But that's the easy stuff. The hard stuff is when you want to do what is right and you have no clue how to fix it. When a relationship is going south and you have not even the faintest notion what to do to make it any better. Because then you are completely helpless. There's no path forward for you. And this is the reason, friends, why we come to church, why we read the Word, why we learn to think about things, because we have to develop a wisdom of life that enables us to deal with the things that we have never thought about before. We need to become expert at spiritual living. So the goal is to become loving. And yes, there are times when we just flat out don't want to do what we know we need to do. Okay, so we work on that. But the thing that we're going to have to labor about is developing that understanding of how to do that more thoughtfully, more lovingly. Like I was saying a second ago about labor, it always takes longer than we want. That woman was in the wilderness 1,260 days, which is 3.5 years, going by the old, for those of you who are math people, 360-day years. And that's that waiting time where we gain the wisdom to deal with the situation that comes up. It's where we keep on trying and trying again and going and getting help. And here's the thing, that wilderness, that's also part of us. There's this lower part of us that just isn't interested in living a spiritual life. And as we persist, as we say, no, I will attempt. Whoops, I fell down. I will attempt again. I didn't feel like reading the Word. No, I will read it, even if it feels like I'm just going through the motions. Each of those things that we do that brings the Lord in is like inviting streams of water into our wilderness. And before we know it, grasses, trees, flowers are growing up, and then there are animals there. And that's what transforms us. That effort to do that otherworldly thing again and again until without our even really noticing it, we're able to express that love that we had desired all along. It all starts with the aspiration. If we don't have crazy high goals for how we can love people, we'll never try to love them that way. We'll just kind of settle. We'll get good stuff, just not as much as the Lord wants. So in what way is the Lord calling you to love in a way that stretches you? What wisdom might you need where you feel a little helpless because you just don't know what to do, that you can go and seek from the Lord? So we're going to end this service with Holy Supper. And it's a fantastic time to ask those questions, to ask for that help. What are your deepest wishes for your spiritual life? What are those wilderness parts that you need help reclaiming in your life? You won't get a miracle fix, that'd be nice. What you'll get is a little baby that's one day going to grow into the adult who will rule all nations with a rod of iron. But the fact that we're striving and feeling like I've just got enough wisdom to get through today opens up that channel within which the Lord can work His incredible miracles. And He does all the important things. The thing that we need to do is be willing to have that aspiration in the first place and throw our being into it and believe that He can make that miracle happen. Amen.